Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go. Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. I'm your host, John Scardina. I have Herb Thompson with me here today. He's an author. He's a former Green Beret. He has a glorious beard. If you're not watching, if you're listening, he's all things very cool. And so I'm very honored to have him here for this Veterans Day episode. Herb, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, happy to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, so you're passionate about a lot of things, and it's very cool to see that, especially your book, though, about that transition period. Can you get, for this, the audience, saying, can you give a little more about your background and talk about why you became the author of the book?
Yeah, briefly, I'm more than happy to share my background. I, grew up in upstate New York, poor, had no other options pretty much, and then joined the military, joined at 17, had two goals, be a drill sergeant and be a Green Beret. And I was able to accomplish both of them. I'm actually the only person ever to be the Army's Drill Sergeant of the Year and earn the Green Beret. So all that said, I made my own coffee this morning. It's not that big a deal, And then, was able to serve all across the Middle East and Southwest Asia, Afghanistan. Then it was time to get out when I was in my late 30s and was like, well, what am I going to do? Because hopefully I have a lot of life left to live, but I don't know what I want to do. I'm fortunate. I met my goals. So I had to dive into that and figure it out. And now, I work in the tech sector, helping veterans and military spouses find careers. That's my day job. I also, like I said, I've wrote the book. I do other things on the side, keynote speaking and such.
What a side gig to do keynote speaking, by the way. That's hilarious. But to be able to fulfill both of those goals, to be all in for this mission, and then to get out, I see a lot of emergency managers and really firefighters, law enforcement, a lot of people who transition out of military or another field. Like, we have a lot of firefighters who become emergency managers once they're done with that tactical stuff. And I think that transition can be really difficult for them. I actually, Kathy Lanier, she was chief of police in D.C. during the Navy Yard shooting. And then I saw her years later at the NFL, and she talked about how difficult it was for her to transition as well. Why do you think that is for people? Is it because you wish you could still do one thing? I mean, you grew a beard, so you got to be happy about some things, but why is that so difficult for so many people?
It is very difficult, right? And I'm glad you brought that up on like first responders, because to me it's the same thing as the military, and to me it's because it's not a job, it's a way of life. If you're at a firehouse, you're with your crew 24, maybe 36 hours, and then you go home and you come back, right? Or if you're on patrol as a police officer or something, you're with your people. That's what you do, and it's a way of life. It's not just, I clock in 9 to 5. Same in the military, right? Whenever that goes away, you've lived a certain lifestyle, whether that's 4 years or 30 years, and the mentality that goes with that. And I always say about the military, and I believe it's compatible with first responders and in the field, is, hey, I knew I had a purpose. There wasn't a day where I didn't wake up going, I know I'm doing something. Worst case, Ma, Pa, America, right? I'm doing something bigger than myself. And then, hey, I had the purpose. I had a team around me. I had a team. I had a tribe. These were my people. Literally would die for me, right? They would die for me. I would die for them. And then when you give all that up, who's your team now? When you leave the firehouse, when you leave your unit in the military, and then your identity. Even if I hated being called by my rank and always wanted to be called by Herb, but like at the end of the day, I was Master Sergeant Herb Thompson. I was the team sergeant. I was, a Green Beret. If you're a patrolman or a firefighter, whatever you are, that becomes a lot of your identity. And then the day you take off that uniform, you're just back to Herb again. And we've spent so long and, a lot of our lives focused on not being, in my case, Herb. How do I be Herb? What is Herb? Like, what do I want to do? Because if I want to be like in my case, I wanted to be a Green Beret. I want to be a drill sergeant. I want to be a Green Beret. I could look up how to do that. I could ask some people, but there is direct steps. And quite frankly, it's off a list, right? There's manuals to follow. Same within in many of the career fields and first responders. Like, hey, here's how you go from a patrol officer and work up, or to a probie on the fire department to working up. You go, there's, what you need to do.
100%.
When you leave that, hey, I could do anything in the world. That's awesome. Holy crap, it's also scary because I don't know what I want to do. Like most adults, we don't know.
Yeah, you just sound like literally every person out there. Yeah, it's the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapsed and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at l3harris.com right now. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today. That's a good point. Not just the job, but the identity. Even me, and I wouldn't consider myself a tactician by any means, right? Like, I've always been on the strategic side, but when I started this company, when I started Doberman Emergency Management, and then eventually the podcasting, the Readiness Lab, and all that stuff, it was also incredibly difficult. People would ask me, like, what do I do? I'm like, oh, like, I'm an emergency manager, former National Strike Team, I'm at West, whatever. And I respond to incidents like, oh, what incidents have you responded to recently? Well, now I do plans and training in the private sector. Like, what do you do? And so, like, that identity of that stuff, including podcasting. And full disclosure, have you ever seen the movie City Slickers?
Oh, yeah.
It's freaking hilarious.
Classic.
Okay. So you know how he's like, all the dads get up at the beginning of in the kindergarten class, and he's like, I'm a firefighter. I'm in law enforcement. I'm a captain in the whatever. And he gets like, I'm in radio. I had this thought years ago, right after my son was born. I was in the shower, and I thought about him being in kindergarten, and that same thought came up. And then all of a sudden I could hear myself say, I'm a podcaster. And like, I just died inside. It was like the worst feeling. And I was like, all right. But luckily, fast forward, we're still doing good work, but other people have been able to learn from the guests who've come on the show. And so I'm like, okay, I see there's a lot of value in this. But that identity crisis has been struggling for me for years. And now I'm like, okay, I'm in the private sector. I'm happy to be here. I can work on all these different projects. But it was not a fun transition to change that mindset. And I didn't even live in the firehouse. I didn't do all this, the cool stuff you did in the military. What if everybody is going to sound weird, but this is not a new problem, right? Like, people have been serving in militaries for millennia.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's still a problem? Why there's not a lot of resources to help people to be able to transition?
I actually believe there's too many resources.
Oh, interesting.
Right. I know that's maybe not a popular opinion for military.
Yeah. No, I want to hear about it. Yeah.
There's over 50,000 veteran service organizations in the United States. Not all of them can be good. You know what I mean? And it's hard to pick through and then that resources. And if say I'm doing well in life, I want to donate some money or I want to donate some time. Well, which of the 50,000 do I do that to help? So to me, it's such a major, issue that through all these veteran service organizations, and many of them are doing great work, but how do I know as a veteran, which one do I go to? And then how do I know as someone who wants to be a supporter, where do I give my time? Where do I give who's good? Who's like, they all kind of look similar. So I actually feel for like first responders, right? Firefighters, police officers, because there's not a ton of resources out there, right? And hey, let's be real. Hey, it's Veterans Day. I go in and get my 10% off at Lowe's, or I can go get my free bloomin' onion at Outback Steakhouse. But like, hey, where's that for like the firefighter? Now the current firefighter that may, but like the retired firefighter, former firefighter, there's not really anything like that. So saying all that is complex, right? And it's up to, I believe, the American people to help their veterans reintegrate, because it's going to work towards the future. If we don't take care of our veterans, who's going to join tomorrow, right? And in the amount of people in the U.S. that are able, like, meet the requirements to join is dropping. It is going down drastically to where now it might be around 10% actually meet the requirements to join. That's a national security issue. If we don't help people get back out, who's the best recruiter? Someone who had a positive experience, whether that is in any form of any organization. The person that gets out and talks good about it. If you have a bad experience and you don't talk good about it, how many conversations do those people have over the years with family, friends, coworkers? They're like, don't join the military, don't join the police, don't join the government, don't do this. Or do they say, hey, you know what? Yeah, it was good times. Yeah, there were some rough times, but here's a good time. Do they speak positively about it? And I think it helps towards recruiting across all their, there's shortages across recruiting, across just about everything where there's similar to what we're talking about.
Hey, we just want to do a quick pause X to thank all of our sponsors with the Readiness Lab Podcast Network, L3 Harris, Forerunner, C. Bernie World, HQE Systems, Ampapar Response Training Center, Impulse, Doberman Emergency Management, and especially all of you who subscribe to the TRL Insider Program and who are listening to this episode right now. Thank you so much for your support. Let's jump back in. I still remember in high school talking to somebody who was a veteran, and he was in the Navy, and he said, I served in the Navy, so you don't have to, don't join. And it didn't really deter me too much, but I've never forgotten him saying that. Now, I never wanted to be in the Navy. The idea of being in the Navy and being on a ship underwater was not an idea that I wanted. But, it's like,
No.
I like land. Land is good. But nonetheless, every time, this is my real problem with military and first responders. Every time I hang out with somebody like you, I'm like, man, I wonder if there's a way I can still join. Every time I hang out with like my firefighter buddies, I'm like, maybe there's still a way that I could become a firefighter. Like when I see people who are passionate about that, who have that identity, I crave it. And I think people in a general sense are like that, right? Like when they see people like you, and to your point, we need a lot more people saying that, because if you're looking at emergency services across the board and military, not only the competencies are failing, but the shift in personality, right? Not I want to say personality, but culture around those things. Like when I was a kid, fire, police, EMS, military, those were always the good guys.
Yeah.
And top tier. And now there's a lot of disinformation. And honestly, there's been stupid stuff too to change people's opinions. So you need people out there. I'm gonna throw you out another problem though, is when people transition to something like emergency management, because especially the firefighters, but even military, because there's not a lot of great resources, it's very frustrating for me because they hold on to that identity so much, but they're actually very bad at their job. And it's like, man, if you could take that skill set and that passion and put it here, you'd be amazing. But sometimes they're unwilling to I want to say let go, but to transition into that.
It is difficult to and I've seen it with people who've served a couple of years or 35 years. Normally I see the longer someone serves, the more harder it is to let go. And let's be real, it's just same as someone who goes to prison, and you go to prison for 25 years, that shapes your life, right? And it's probably hard to let it go when you leave. Same thing with the military. It's hard to let it go. And are you going to leverage those skills and experiences you had, but drive through the windshield, or are you going to look in the rear view and go, hey, I'm still the gunny, I'm still the captain. It's like, no, you're Joe, you're Susie. Welcome, put your rank over there. No one cares. Let's be real. No one cares about, thank you for your service. All right, let's move on. And go to that. And it is a mental thing, but it goes back to that because it's a kind of a way of life, right? It's a way of life. And when, we take off the uniform one day, hang it up, it doesn't necessarily take what's out of here. And that we want that experience. We want those skill sets. Absolutely. But I look at it as a new mission. Just like if I was going to deploy over insert name of country, I'm going to study the country and I'm going to learn the culture and values, and I'm going to try to assimilate as best as possible, bringing in my skill sets. That's where my book, The Transition Mission, that's where the name came from. This was I looked at it as like a deployment into America. This is my deployment. I'm going into
Yeah.
America. I have these skill sets. This is my mission for the rest of my life. Let
Mm,
me use that, but I'm still not, I see a lot with people, they can't let it go,
mm.
and it's difficult.
Well, I think you're a great example in many areas, and one of which is remaining passionate. Some people, when they can't move over from whatever field they were in before, the passion dies. If they're able to keep passion up, whatever passion is for them, then I still think they do phenomenal. It's like shocking to me. Like I'll meet these people and they'll have these like awesome stories. I hear the identity, I hear the love of their field, whatever that field was, and then I see their work and I'm like, man, like I understand it's maybe not as exciting, or it's harder to see results, especially in emergency management. When you do training, you rarely get to see how that training plays out in the future. And luckily for me, I've kind of integrated security and emergency management because we're working with professional stadiums now and that kind of stuff. So I get to see it in real time. But for a lot of people, they don't, and that passion dies. Ironically, if they kept the passion up, they would probably keep seeing stuff, and they would be
Yeah.
happier.
On that, I always tell people, however you're passionate when you join the military, right? Or when you join the police, like, let me get through the academy, whether it's police academy, fire academy, whether it's, federal law enforcement academy with boot camp, commissioning source, that passion, that eagerness, that curiosity to learn, that motivation, do the same thing now. And usually the problem is ego. Ego says, well, I'm such and such. I'm so, and it's like, well, you got to step back and learn. You got to go back to being the new person again. Doesn't mean your skills weren't relevant, but you got to learn a new skill set. And if your ego doesn't allow you to do that, it's hard to find that passion, right? Because now it's like, oh, what is that? And it can be difficult to figure out. Maybe it is not. I always say service. I know we're talking about emergency management. It could be that from people coming from the military, coming from first responders. But hey, maybe it's just in your community. You don't need a official title. You don't need a little badge or something to go do good in the world. It's just maybe helping in your local civic organization, youth club, sporting organizations, churches, wherever it is. You don't need. And I was having a conversation once. I have a lot of people come to me like, I wanted to join the military, but X happened, right? And okay, great. we yeah, uh, sounds fresh, right, John? Uh, but uh, but one was a restaurant owner, right? And I said, look around. I was a restaurant slash bar pub, and I was like, look around, look at the smiles you're seeing. And it happened to be a veterans event that was being hosted there, but I'm like, look at the smiles and the community that is built right here in this building. That is service. Now, no one's going to give you a special, hey, chef's day, like, woo, go get your 10% discount on Lowe's or something. But you are doing something that is important and impactful in your community. Don't discount that.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. Whatever your sphere of influence is, like you can help people. Like, I heard a quote when I was younger that from somebody who had a reputation for being just incredibly cool and kind, and he said that in his mind he assumes that when he meets a stranger, it's the worst day of their life, and it's his job to improve their life. And that could be true or not, but the fact that he is so incredibly kind to everybody, it shows that at least he found something in his mindset to say it's my job to make sure they don't have a worse day because of me. And that I think that is contagious in so many ways. I think the opposite is also contagious. I think depression breeds depression and anxiety and all those things. But
If I
yeah,
may on that, John, I think that was a big problem with when we had COVID going on. Not to go back to, PTSD for some folks who may have, lived through that. We put masks on, right? And you don't know if I'm smiling or not. And that to me, especially with our youth, there's a huge difference of seeing someone smile and not smile. What is their kind of mood? And like you said, that negativity will breed negativity, positivity will breed positivity.
yeah, and whose ever will is stronger in that, right?
Yeah.
If the person who's depressed will to be depressed is stronger than the opposite, then they will win every time. And I think it goes both ways. I think there's different ways to present it as well. The difficult part is I know that there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast who desperately want it. They're like listening to you right now and they're saying, I want to be passionate, but I am depressed, or I am getting out of the military. I'm doing skill bridge, which is cool stuff, by the way. Like I'm trying, but it's just not there. What would you say to those people who want it but can't?
Be curious to learn, put yourself out there, uh, be uncomfortable, right? We don't know. Like I said earlier, join the military. Hey, let me pick these. How many ever jobs there? I'll pick this one. It's a list. Well, now you don't have a list. You could do anything. How do you do that? You talk with people, build relationships, find out. One, surround yourself with good people. I'm a huge believer in surround yourself with good people and good stuff happens. I'm also a huge believer in cutting negative toxicity out of my life. And if it's going to be that, okay, I'm not going to associate with that person, organization, whatever it is anymore, because life's too short. I only got one life. I don't want to go down in the dumps with that. But talk with people, and through those conversations, stuff that we don't know what we don't know. So I don't even know what to look for. But if I go talk to you, John, and I'm like, hey, and you're like, hey, what about this security thing? I'm like, I didn't even know that existed. Let me talk to another person about that. And I keep going down the list until I talk to people. And then at some point I have to try something out. And I go do it. And I go, this is pretty good. Let me keep doing this. Or I go, you know what? This sucks. Let me find something new to do in life, because I can do that. I don't have to stay in said role or organization forever. Like, let me just try something out. But I'd like to make an informed decision and talk to people and do research before I go try something.
Yeah, I mean, you said you had one life. I agree. Like, I don't have time. I don't have time to waste on things that are not important. You know, I've one of the things that people come to me with is being overwhelmed in their job. That's the other side of it. They're like, because they lack competency, and that's not intelligence. That's just training.
Yeah.
They get overwhelmed. There's scope creep and all this other stuff, including people who transition or people who've been in the job for a while. And I start asking them like really basic questions, like, is anybody going to care about this in 6 weeks? If you don't do this, are people going to like, is your reputation going to be ruined in a year? I don't think so. Like, half of this stuff doesn't really matter. We stay busy because we think we should stay busy.
Yeah. A lot of it's self-induced. Like with stress, a lot is self-induced. It just, we put it on ourselves, these expectations that just are unnecessary.
Well, you mentioned ego before and expectations. Sometimes when I meet guys, like soft guys like yourself, I think of like Michael Jordan, funny enough, because Michael Jordan was really soft spoken. But then like on the court, that guy had the biggest ego in the world and could talk. And I'm 100% confident the Green Berets, the Naval SEALs that I meet, a lot of these guys are very soft spoken, but you have to have a huge ego at one point. For I don't know, ego or you have to be able to say, I'm going to win in this moment. Like you can't have any doubt, right? And if you don't have any doubt, then that has to come through training and through mindset and a bunch of other stuff that I'm probably not aware of. My big question on that is, some people don't know how to turn that off, and some people also don't know how to turn it on. What motivates you? I knew you since you were a kid, you've always wanted the job, right? And you got those 2 jobs, but how do you maintain what is an appropriate level of interaction?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, it is, I'm driven to make a difference. We go back to the one life. I want to, for me, I always say I'm owning my journey, right? I always say to people, own your journey. And that is what I'm doing. And if that's at Special Forces selection at 2 a.m. alone, walking through the woods with a heavy pack on, yeah, you know what? That is a lot of ego. That is confidence and just one more step. And I just keep one more step in all the way until morning. And then I keep going. If it's, a different way though, is, hey, let me go into this village. There's 100 of them armed with AK-47s. I don't speak the same language. Some of them may like me. Some of them definitely do not like me. I can't come in with an ego. I'm coming in to build friends. And my security, because we'll just say there's 100 of them and a couple of me or one of me. I can do math. It doesn't work in my favor to go to guns. So I have to build relationships. I got to show them I'm a human and make a human connection. So the ego has to go way out the door. Like, just leave it. leave it back. Don't even take it out off the base with you. So that's in the military sense. Now for me is, yeah, it's a daily balance. And I think if there's a challenge in moments, that's where confidence comes in. Hey, my past successes will, show I can do this. Let me drive myself. But it comes down to motivation. If you're not motivated, whatever that is, and for me, it's, I want a better life for my kids. I truly want a better America. I want what's good for my community around me. And I want a good life. And what's my legacy? What's my legacy going to be? Hopefully they don't write my obituary for a long time, right? I'm hoping it's like 40, 50 years from now. But like, what's that going to say? And to me, even at this point, hey, I was a Green Beret, I was Army's Drill Sergeant of the Year. I've award-winning best-selling author. I got an MBA from Ivy League University, Cornell. If that's all that's in my obituary, I've failed for the rest of my life because I have so much more to do and live. Let me use that for good.
I like that. They're definitely going to write about your beard. That's for sure. That beard is absolutely glorious. But yeah, it's funny now. Like I have been open about having a huge ego and needing to put my ego in check. And I have learned that every time I use my ego to make a decision to interact with somebody else, it never does very well for me. It hoses me every time. Yeah. So big ego or not, having enough intelligence to say like, well, what is the win here? One of the things I've learned, I think, is, I want to be the best. I can't settle for being in second place. Like that's just not me. I can't do that. But I think I've come to the realization and be okay with there can be thousands of other people in that top tier. Like I don't have to, it's the mountain's it's not a peak. It's not a single person, right? Like it's more of a plateau. And I want to be surrounded by other people who are top tier. The people who work with me right now, they're phenomenal. They're literally the best people I've ever met, and in many regards better than me. And so it's like that ego leaning towards confidence, I think is okay. Ego leaning towards pride hoses you every time. And the leading to confidence allows you to be surrounded with great people like you were calling out there. And it's a lot more fun to be around other people who are as motivated as you.
It definitely is. I'm competitive, right? Like my fiance Corey will tell you, like how quick we get through the grocery store is competitive, right? In my mindset, like I'm like, let's go. Everything's how quick can I make it to the gas station? Like, oh, I beat my time by 3 seconds today. I'm competitive, right? But there's a line where that is too much, right? And finding when to push into that and realizing it's not a zero-sum game. My success doesn't mean you can't be successful, John. Like you were saying, why don't we be successful together? Like all, rising tides lift all ships. There's a Navy reference for those out there. It's, hey, we can all be good and successful. It doesn't have to come at someone else's cost.
Yeah, that's a great point. I work with somebody who's the most competitive person I've ever met, and I'm also very competitive, and it can be fun or it can be very annoying because they will not stop. And I like to be the boss. I like to be in charge, but when they start to beat me, that ego gets a problem. But again, surrounding yourself with good people. At the beginning of this episode, I thought we were going to be talking a little bit more about counterterrorism and some of your history, but for the sake of this podcast and about leadership, you're just demonstrating all the right things. And I really do hope that as people are listening to this, to hearing from somebody who's done the job, who has been there, who has all the accolades in the world, the best-selling author, the sergeant, the sergeant of the year, Green Beret, all the stuff, world globetrotter, right? And yet you're sitting here telling people to find passion and to, take on a new mission and to find good things. And if anything, from a person on a smaller scale who's had to do that, I appreciate it. And I know the field really appreciates everything you're doing. Seriously, thank you so much for coming on and talk with me.
No, it's my pleasure, John. More than happy, to come back again. It's just great conversation.
Let's do it. Let's actually have you. Hopefully January isn't insane, but if January is insane, let's have you come back on either way. And, the beginning of next year and talk about maybe counterterrorism and some of those other stuff that I think you could drastically help out, my audience learning about.
Definitely. I want to come back and talk, that future threat. It's not if, it's when we're going to be attacked again, and we can sit and do nothing, or we can prepare both, the private sector and the public sector, right? And individuals and lash up. So yeah, more than happy to come back. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
I'll try to grow my beard back at least a little bit by the time
Start get going.
Yeah. How many years did that take you, by the way?
I'm at 5.5 years right now, but I mean, I trim it. Like, it would be longer. I trim it up a little bit, but this is kind of like, if it starts getting in the way of like Corey, my fiance, going, hey, it's attacking me too much, then I need to like trim it down.
So for everybody who's listening, it's like a foot long, and he's saying that he likes to keep it short, and it's like literally off the screen right now, which is hilarious. So when I had the beard, I had to cut my upper lip because it drives my wife crazy. So at least you got that. Hey, either way, Herb, thank you so much for coming on and talk with me. It would be a disservice for myself and everybody else. If they want to find your book, what's the fastest way that they can buy your book?
Yeah, go to Amazon, The Transition Mission, or go to herb-thompson.com.
Perfect. If you got something out of this episode, everybody, got to give us that like and subscribe. We say that every time. It's the fastest way we know. If you have a question for Herb specifically, that's just for you. You're going through it, whatever. You can send us an email at contact@thereadinesslab.com. We'll send it over to him. Otherwise, if you're a veteran or in services and you've transitioned well, put it on LinkedIn on our comments. Let us see what you've done, and tag Herb because he's a cool guy with a super long beard. And we'll see you for the next one. Peace.